everyone, welcome to In the Kitchen with Halifax Public Libraries. I'm Emily Glover and I'm a registered dietitian and a professional chef, and today we're in the beautiful Sackville Library kitchen making another cozy, delicious slow cooker meal. So today we're going to be making corn chowder. It's really creamy, even though there's no cream in it, and also we're going to be putting some bacon bits. So it's pretty luxurious, pretty delicious, and great for a crisp autumn day. This recipe actually we're putting right into our slow cooker, and the wonderful thing about making slow cooker prep is that you can just toss everything in at once, turn it on, and walk away. So the recipe we're making today, you can either cook for 4 hours on high or you can cook for 8 hours on low. And I really like the second option there because I can just throw it all in the pot before work, and when I come home, the smell in the house is unbelievable. The whole family is ready to eat right away when they're getting done their day, and the flavors that develop throughout the day cannot be matched quickly on a stovetop. Another part is that we don't have to go through the steps of sauteing each ingredient and making sure everything is ready to go before the next step. We just throw everything in all at once. And another great thing about slow cooker recipes is that if you have extra time on the weekend, on a Saturday, and you want to chop a bunch of vegetables and toss it in a Tupperware container with all the other ingredients needed to go, you can have one for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you don't even need to do anything in the morning except for taking the Tupperware out of the fridge, throwing it right into your slow cooker, and walking out the door. So slow cookers actually are very safe. They cook at the appropriate temperature to make sure the food is safe all day long, but the heat isn't so high that you need to worry about it catching fire in your house. So it's a safe device, but it's also very, very convenient. So whenever you have a chance to use your slow cooker, I definitely recommend that you try it out and experiment with different recipes. Another benefit of the slow cooker is that you can save a lot of money. Because you can buy tougher pieces of meat, which are always cheaper, but they'll be so tender and luxurious after several hours cooking low throughout the day. And so there's so many benefits to slow cookers. So I'm going to get started with a little bit of chopping for our corn chowder today. This is something you can actually make into fish chowder if you want to, but we're going to just be making corn chowder today. And we're also going to be serving it with a whole wheat roll, so it would be a nice healthy filling and hearty meal after a long hard day at work. So I'll come on over here and I'll do another quick demo of the onion. I know I showed you this last time, but like I said, practice makes perfect. So again, I just want you to take your knife at home if you're cooking along with me and cut your onion right in half from the root to the tip in one swift motion. It makes it a lot easier to peel this way. And if you keep your peelings, you can actually make your own homemade stock. A lot of people say that if you keep the root intact while you're chopping, it also reduces the amount that you tear up and cry while you chop an onion. I don't know if that's true or not. I still seem to tear up a little bit, but there's a lot of myths about onions, so it's hard to pinpoint which is true. So I'm just going to quickly run my knife through a couple horizontal strokes to make some nice even pieces. And vertical as well, and then when we do it from the side, we're going to have perfectly uniform pieces, and just kind of freestyle at the end near the root so you get every little bit of onion, because we don't like food waste here in the Sackville Library kitchen. So I'm going to do the same with the other side. Always keep your claw shape. I know I said that before, but that's such an important rule to guard your fingers. I'm going to run the knife through just a few times and finish chopping our onion up. So we're going to add that to our slow cooker. And just like when you start a recipe on the stove, I recommend to use a little bit of oil just to prevent any possible sticking. But if you use cooking spray, it helps you control the amount of oil. And the less cooking oil that you use, the less calorie dense your meal is going to be, but it will still be just as satisfying. So you can just line the bottom with your cooking oil. It's just a few seconds with the cooking spray. And I'm going to go ahead and add in my onion. And next I'm just going to chop up my holy trinity of vegetables. So last time I kind of discussed what that meant. So the French like to call it a mirepoix, and it's the base to most French dishes, the onion, the carrot, and the celery, just because all those flavors go together so well. And so I'm going to go ahead and chop these up. Of course, we're putting some potatoes in our chowder. What chowder would be complete without some potatoes? We're using some corn today, of course, and we're just tossing it all in the cooker. So just give me a few minutes to chop these up and we'll be right back. So again, you can use the veggie mix that you get at the grocery store in the frozen section if you want to avoid all the chopping. But like I said, it's good practice to get in the kitchen and chop, and it sometimes can be a money saver if you find a good price on fresh produce. Like carrots, for example, are always very affordable. So it really just depends on your mood, how much time you have. But this recipe is especially quick if you have frozen veggies just to toss in with the rest of the ingredients. So a tip I always like to talk about with anybody watching my cooking demos is that a key to success in the kitchen is a sharp knife. So the reason you want to make sure you have a sharp knife when you're cooking is because it's a lot safer if you're cooking or chopping something hard and it wiggles a little bit. It could possibly cut your finger if it doesn't go easily through the food. But if you have a nice sharp knife, it's more likely that you're going to be able to cut right through the food. Also, if you do get cut with a sharp knife, it's going to make a cleaner cut, so it's less likely to get infected or be a major wound. So there's a lot of benefits to having a sharp knife. It just makes your life a lot easier in the kitchen, and it makes it a lot safer as well. So I definitely recommend, if you have the time to run out to Walmart or any other kitchen supply store, it can be really affordable actually to get a knife sharpener, maybe $3 or $4. And all you really need to do with those is just run your knife through a few times. And a trick I like to tell people how to know if their knife is sharp is actually taking a tomato and just lightly laying their knife on the skin of the tomato and dragging it across. So you don't actually push down on the knife, but you just let gravity kind of pull it across. And if it cuts through the skin, that's a sharp knife. But if it doesn't, you need to sharpen your knife. So keep that in mind, and if you see one of those affordable knife sharpeners at any of the stores you're shopping at, pick one up. It's a good investment. All right, I'm just going to add my celery into the slow cooker. And we don't even need to have it turned on yet, because once we get everything in together and we give it a nice stir and mix up, then we can turn it on. I think I'll do high for 4 hours with this recipe because I'll be around today to keep an eye on it. But like I said, if you want to have it cooking all day while you're away at work, then 8 hours on low is another great way to cook your chowder. So I'm just going to peel my potatoes and add those in. Potatoes is a great way to get healthy starch into your diet. It makes it feel full longer because there's fiber in potatoes, and also of course it just makes it a hearty chowder. That's what you're looking for on a crisp autumn day. You can also use anything you have at home that's kind of like a root vegetable. So you could try a sweet potato, squash, anything that's kind of starchy would go well in this chowder as well. So my biggest tip, if you want to get comfortable in the kitchen, is just to experiment. Figure out what flavors go together, what veggies go well in which recipes, and try never to waste any of your ingredients. So if you have just a bunch of stuff at the bottom of your fridge at the end of the week, try chopping it up, throwing it in a slow cooker with some spices you have in your cupboard, and it might turn out to be the best stew you ever had. So that's my tip for the day on reducing your food waste. It's okay to leave little spots of skin on your potato if you can't quite get them off. Just make sure you wash your potatoes really, really well before you even get them on your cutting board or before you grab your peeler, because again, you don't want any of that dirt transferring to the cutting board or the rest of your food. So these peelings are going to go really well in our stock pile as well, and we're going to be making some veggie stock later on to use in these recipes. So never waste anything. So now that we have our potatoes peeled, I'm just going to put them into bite-sized pieces. So it's good to put all your vegetables in about the same size, so they're all uniform and they cook around the same time. Potatoes are a good indicator if your chowder is done. So potato is probably the hardest vegetable that's going to be in this recipe. So once the potatoes are soft, you know that it's completely ready to eat. We don't have any raw meat that's going into this, so that's really the best indicator to know when it's done. All right, now that we have our cutting board all cleaned off, I'm just going to dice up the potato. I don't have any special tips for potato dicing other than just cutting into a few thin slices and then just slicing horizontally and then vertically until you get the size that you want. If you're doing like a hearty stew with big chunks of beef, you might want to do a bigger chop. But if you're doing something like this, you might want to do a bit smaller pieces. So I would say this is about a medium-sized dice. All right, we're all done dicing our potatoes. Another tip to save time, they do sell diced frozen potatoes at the grocery store. So if you really didn't want to go through the process of dicing your own potatoes, that's another time saver. So I'm just going to go ahead and toss that right into our slow cooker with our other vegetables. And then we're going to easily just add the rest of our ingredients here. So of course, since it's corn chowder, we're putting lots of corn in there. Corn kind of gets a bad rep. I notice people think it's not really a healthy thing to include in your diet every day, but corn is actually a whole grain. So if you remember, I was talking a little bit before about the healthy plate from Canada's Food Guide and how a whole grain should take up a quarter of your plate at every meal. Corn would count as a whole grain. It has everything intact from when it was growing and also has tons of fiber and nutrients in the corn. So don't be scared to put corn in your recipes. We go ahead and add that right in. And it's also delicious and sweet. So it helps the flavor balance when you're making something a little bit salty, a little bit savory. Having something a little bit sweet in there will help balance those flavors and make it a really delicious chowder. And another form of corn that I'm putting in the chowder is actually creamed corn. So creamed corn brings a nice creamy texture and also thickens the chowder. And so I'm just going to add 2 cans of creamed corn. This is very affordable at the grocery store, especially if you get a no-name brand. I'll go ahead and add that in. Last but not least, we're going to be putting the secret ingredient. So you might think bacon bits, that's not going to make this a very healthy meal, but these bacon bits I actually got from the salad section at the grocery store. And since they're cooked so much, it actually removes most of the fat. So it has all that smoky flavor. It has a pretty decent amount of protein, but not too many calories. So for 1 tablespoon of the bacon bits, which is about how much you would probably get in a serving of this chowder, it's only 30 calories and only 1.5 grams of fat. So for how much flavor you're getting added to your chowder, it's actually kind of worth adding in the bacon bits. So if you're a vegetarian, you can get simulation bacon bits that are made with soy, and they're even cheaper than the regular real bacon bits. And if you don't want to bother with bacon bits at all, but you still want that nice smoky flavor and the added protein, you can use something called TVP. So TVP is textured vegetable protein, and it actually just adds a ton of protein to your meal without adding extra fat. And smoked paprika is just a spice that you can add in to give it that smoky kind of bacon flavor. So play around with it, see how you like it, and I'm going to add in our stock and a bit of our spices, and then we'll be ready to turn on our slow cooker. So for this recipe, we're going to be using a full container of stock. I'm using vegetable stock, but you can use water if you don't have any stock, or you could use chicken stock if you prefer. Or if you want to make it vegetarian, stick with the vegetable stock. So I'm going to put the whole box in here. Something about the slow cooker is that when it cooks, it keeps all the moisture in there. So every drop of liquid you start out with is going to still be there when you're done cooking. So this is a chowder. Obviously, we want it to be a little bit thinned out, so that's why we put a whole box in. But something, if you're making a roast or anything like that, just expect the same amount of moisture to remain in the slow cooker from the beginning to the end. And the last thing we're adding to our chowder is our flavorings. So I'm adding some garlic powder, not garlic salt, because we want to be able to add our own salt depending on the flavor at the end. And I love putting garlic powder in pretty much everything because it just gives it an extra punch of flavor. You can also add fresh garlic if that's what you have. This is just kind of a little bit easier if you have it in your pantry. And the other thing I'm putting in this recipe is Italian seasoning. So this is a mixture of a few different herbs and spices. And this is something I recommend to do at home if you don't have a lot of money to spend on spices, if you don't want to buy 20 different things. If you buy spice mixes like chili powder and Italian seasoning, you can kind of rely on those for a lot of different recipes. So that's a really great thing to have that stocked up in your pantry. Having a stocked pantry makes cooking a lot easier because you don't have to buy everything on the ingredient list every time you try a new recipe. So if you're making a stew or a soup, you know that you already have oil and you have your spices and you have your canned tomatoes or whatever it is that will always be there for you if you keep your pantry stocked. So you only have to buy the bare minimum to cook every day at home. So I'm going to put these aside, and then we're going to turn on our cooker. I'm going to add just a little bit of salt at this point. Like I said, it builds flavor, but at the end we're going to test it again for flavor and maybe have to add a little bit more. So I'm going to plug this in, turn it on to high. So every slow cooker will have a high and a low setting. And then I'm just going to give this a quick stir, cover the pot, and let it go for 4 hours. So I'll try to give you a little peek of what it's looking like at this point. Tilt it, try not to spill, but it already looks pretty decent, and I think it's going to be extra delicious when it's done. So I'm going to put the cover on here and just let it do its thing, walk away. Make sure not to keep lifting the lid while it's cooking, because every time you lift the lid off of the slow cooker, the temperature of the slow cooker drops quite a bit. So you want to just leave it alone, don't think about it, go about your day, and not worry about it too much. But something you can do while you're waiting for it to finish is make your slurry. So a slurry is kind of like a chefy term for something that thickens sauces or soups. And we're going to want like a nice hearty, thick chowder. So what we're doing actually is using evaporated milk, which is going to give it a really creamy, delicious flavor and texture. And we're going to mix that in with cornstarch. And once we do that, that's our slurry. And our slurry will go into the chowder 20 minutes before it's done cooking. So a slurry actually needs heat to be able to thicken the liquid in the chowder, because when starch is heated up, it actually absorbs water. So that's why we're doing it that way, but make sure not to add it in until about 20 minutes before it's finished cooking, or the evaporated milk will actually break apart and it will look kind of gross and milky. So you want a nice creamy texture. So wait until the end to add in your milk and your cornstarch. So I'm going to show you how to make the slurry. Just grab a little bowl and add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to your bowl. And the trick is not to just dump all of your evaporated milk right into the cornstarch, because it will get lumpy. If you add just a little bit, it will smooth out, and then you can add a little bit more until it's completely smooth. So I'm going to grab a fork and we'll start whisking it together. So I would say maybe add in about a tablespoon at a time. It will start out as a really, really thick mixture. And as you add more, it will get thinner and thinner. But don't worry, like I said, once you add it to heat and let it cook a little bit longer, it will really thicken up your chowder at the end. So make sure there's no lumps after you add your first bit of milk. And add just a bit more here. And you can just keep that in the fridge until it's ready to put into your chowder. And there's your slurry. So as you can tell, that was a really easy recipe to make. It's already starting to steam up here, meaning it's getting nice and warm, and it's going to be ready in 4 hours to enjoy with my friends and family. So I'm just going to add my slurry right before it's finished, give it about another 20 minutes, a few stirs, and then serve it out. I'm also going to serve it with a whole wheat bun to make it a full meal. And if at this point, when you add in your slurry, 20 minutes before it's done cooking, and you want to add some raw fish cooks very, very quickly. So you'll be able to tell that the fish is done cooking when it's turned completely not opaque, it's white, flaky, and you can kind of tell when you take a fork that it falls apart easily. So you'll know the fish is done. So it doesn't take very long at all to cook the fish. So in that way, you'll have lots of protein in your meal, you'll have at least half a plate of your vegetables, and you'll have your whole grain as well. So that's a really healthy meal for your family. So thank you so much for cooking along with us today. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and we'll see you next time on In the Kitchen with Halifax Public Libraries.